Assalamu alaikum.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa alihi.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi al-tahirin.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa alihi.
During the last few nights, we've been discussing the story of the Pharaoh and how Nabi Musa alayhi salam was instructed to do Amr bil Ma'ruf to such a figure. Pharaoh had two sides to him. The outer side was that of arrogance, but according to traditions, his inner side was one of humility and destitution. He knew he wasn't Rabbul Alameen, but on the outside he claimed such. And that arrogance was predominating over his inner dimension for a period of time. Since he wasn't totally veiled, and the probability of guidance still remained as a result of the actions he had done in his earlier years, Allah saw the potential, and the story in chapter 20 is a story of how such a figure, such as Pharaoh, is aimed to be brought to the right, the straight path. So first, Allah, since there is some probability of change, the Pharaoh wasn't totally veiled, Allah sends two prophets. Then He tells the two prophets how to speak. It has to be in a smooth way. And then He tells the prophets what to say to the Pharaoh. All this we've discussed before. Last night, the point was in this journey of guiding the Pharaoh still rejects and claims that Nabi Musa wants to perform magic. He brings his own sorcerers, and in this journey of guiding the Pharaoh, the sorcerers become guided and they accept Islam and they become martyred. But the Pharaoh still, the arrogance aspect is predominating over his inner destitution. And then the last step of this narrative, and the last step in this guiding of the Pharaoh, maybe it's the last stone, so to speak. Here, Allah, this is where we ended up last night. The next step in the protocol was, or the last step rather, Allah says to Nabi Musa, revealed upon Nabi Musa to bring about a dry path in the ocean and bring my people across the ocean and to save Bani Israel. Now, this is where we ended, and it was here that when the drowning of the Pharaoh was to happen, the Pharaoh declared and professed La ilaha illallah in a particular way, and he professed to having Iman and to being one of the Muslims. Now, we're going to go through this slowly, but then the question is that, was this accepted by Allah or not? And this is where some differences amongst the scholars exist, although it doesn't matter which side you take, I'm just giving you one perspective. The theologians say Allah didn't accept this declaration of faith by the Pharaoh. The Urafa, they say Allah did accept, and they bring their reasons, and inshallah we'll go through through this together, one by one. So let's go through a number of verses first, just to get a feel of what's happening. In chapter 28, verse 40, فَأَخَذْنَاهُ وَجُنُودَهُ. So we seized upon him, the Pharaoh and his army. فَنَبَذْنَاهُمْ فِي الْيَمِّ. We threw them into the sea. فَانْظُرْ كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الظَّالِمِينَ. So see what the fate of the wrongdoers are. Yes. Here we see that they're doing a wrongdoing. As a result of that wrongdoing, Allah throws them into the sea. In chapter 17, 103, فَأَرَادَ أَن يَسْتَفِزَّهُمْ مِنَ الْأَرْضِ. The Pharaoh desired to drive Bani Israel away from the land. As a result, فَأَغْرَقْنَاهُ وَمَنْ مَعَهُ جَمِيعًا. As a result of what the Pharaoh wanted to do, then we drowned them all, him and those with him. Jami'a, all of them. So here again, as a result of what they wanted to do, the wrongdoing, this was the result. The language of the Quran doesn't necessarily explicitly indicate that this was a divine punishment. It was a punishment, but it wasn't those punishments like the people of Lut, where communities were all destroyed, the earth was capsized, and so on and so forth, or the surface area was capsized. Here, it was a punishment, if you like what today we call a tsunami, if you like. It may have been more severe, but it was localized for a certain people. The nature of the punishment wasn't like the divine punishments that we see elsewhere in the Quran. It's only a speculation for now. And all of them were drowned, the Pharaoh and all his army. If there are exceptions to people not being drowned, either we have to see it in the Quran, or we have to see several traditions from the Ahlul Bayt, so it reaches a level that we have yaqeen that such a thing has occurred. And maybe there are one or two exceptions, we'll come to those, but whether that reaches the point of yaqeen that we say 100% this happened, it's still debatable. Chapter 43, verse 55, فَلَمَّا آسَفُونَا. And when they angered us, انتقمنا منهم فأغرقناهم أجمعين. When they angered us, we took our revenge from them and we drowned them all. When they angered us, naturally Allah never becomes angry. And here the plural is used. Here Allah's representatives can be made angry, but Allah himself can't be made angry. Allah doesn't change in states like humans do. But since Allah's prophets are complete manifestations of Allah's attributes, here sometimes the Quran uses the first person plural. He angered us. You see, that us, meaning that prophet who is a complete manifestation of all of Allah's attributes. And that's why the plural is used. Then we took our revenge against him and we drowned them all. When it says we drowned them all, who's the we here? Here, again, you revert the we to all of Allah's attributes being in play. For example, even when Allah sends rain, He uses when we send rain. It's Allah who sends rain, so why is it used the first person plural? We. Some people say it's the royal we. That's a grammatical point. It's not a very deep point. But where he sent you rain, all of Allah's attributes are in play when the rain is sent. His mercy and also His revenge. That same rain can do many things. That same rain, all of His attributes are in play though. For some people it manifests as Allah's mercy. Allah's wrath may also be manifested for some. But anyway, all of them were drowned. So this, the language so far, it's a cause and effect relationship. They did wrong, they were punished with drowning. It doesn't necessarily mean this was one of those divine punishments. It can do. I'm just saying it's not explicit here. Those divine punishments are very explicit in the Quran. The language is different here. Now, in chapter 10, verse 90, the story starts, and it's very important now. The last 3 or 4 nights were all a preliminary to this. وَجَوَزْنَا بِبَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ الْبَحْرَ. So we made Bani Israel cross the sea. فَأَتْبَعَهُمْ فِرْعَوْنُ وَجُنُودُهُ. And pursuing them was the Pharaoh and his army, بَغْيًا وَعَدْوًا. They were pursuing in tyranny, in aggression. They were pursuing now Musa and Bani Israel to get them. حَتَّى إِذَا أَدْرَكَهُ الْغَرَقُ. Until drowning suddenly came upon them, overtook them, meaning they suddenly encountered drowning, not death. They encountered drowning. قَالَ. Then Pharaoh said, آمَنْتُ. I have faith. أَنَّهُ. That لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا الَّذِي آمَنَتْ بِهِ بَنُو إِسْرَائِيلَ وَأَنَا مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. That I have faith, I have iman in the fact that there's no deity save that which Bani Israel worshipped and had faith in. And I am one of the Muslims. Now last night we did mention this, but very quickly. Why did he say there's no deity save that which Bani Israel? Just to make sure if there's any ambiguity, just to announce to everyone that the God that they were worshipping, I have faith in that God. Not the God that I was declaring for myself, not the deityhood, the lordship that I was declaring for myself, no. It's the same God, deity, which Bani Israel also were professing to. The sorcerers also used the same language, if you recall, last night. آمَنَّا بِرَبِّ هَارُونَ وَمُوسَى. So no ambiguity arises. If they said آمَنَّا بِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ, people may have thought, well, they're saying we believe in Pharaoh. And then, in verse 91, after that, Allah is saying, now, who is Allah speaking to? That's a point that we have to take into consideration. These dialogues are important. All of a sudden now it seems the dialogue is between Allah and the Pharaoh. These dialogues with Allah are a state of spirituality here, proximity. Now, وَقَدْ أَسَيْتَ قَبْلُ. Once you had rebelled before. وَكُنْتَ مِنَ الْمُفْسِدِينَ. And you were one of the corrupt ones. It's this now that Allah says, which has caused a lot of debate and differences of opinion. This is a very important tool in Quranic exegesis and and when you want to look at the verse of the Quran. Ibn Arabi's, this is the commentary of that one page in his Futuhat which we're discussing here. Ibn Arabi, his approach to tafsir of the Quran is Quran by the Quran. There's no doubt about that. Allama Tabatabai is known for this method. Scholars say he got it from his Ustad, Ali Qadi. But the main method is traced back to Ibn Arabi here. Allama Tabatabai separately, he has a separate section with each verse. After doing tafsir of the Quran through the Quran, then he brings traditions as buttressing factors to what the Quran shows through itself. And this is something very important because the Quran is the first source of ma'arif, not the ahadith. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the Quran is first, the Ahlul Bayt or second. No, there's a unity between the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. It's one reality. But the ahadith is different to the Ahlul Bayt. These are just traditions by people, transmitted by people. How much those people understood from the Imams, how much they've conveyed. At the end, they come with a lot of traditions. But the traditions can't overrule the Quran. The Quran is always the first source. But the traditions can open inner depths of the Quran. Yes, it's possible. But the Quran is never overruled by traditions. Although this is a very lengthy discussion, but I'm saying it's a worthy method here that Ibn Arabi is using. It's all with the Quran here. Although even as we've gone through the last few nights, I've been using traditions. Especially when we were discussing the earlier years of the Pharaoh, and when he was uttering his inner destitution. These were traditions from the Ahlul Bayt. Ibn Arabi, though, he got to that inner destitution through the Quran, not necessarily through the Ahlul Bayt, not necessarily through traditions. That's not to say he wasn't Shia or anything, but the question of taqiyya was a legitimate concern, especially to express Shiism doctrinally. Many of the Ulafa were killed. Maybe not from a fiqhi point of view, but Shia doctrine, which is almost tantamount to Sufi doctrine, they would kill them, and many were killed. And taqiyya was something very common those days. It wasn't like today, where all the traditions were all connected in one library, and it was easy to access and everything, and it was freedom to say everything different. All honor now, when you had rebelled before, and you were one of the mufsideen, the corrupt ones. Anyway, one tool which is very important in the Quran, when the Quran narrates something from someone, if the Quran is silent, it means that which was narrated from that person once upon a time was true. If it wasn't true, the Quran has to speak out and reject what that person said. The Quran won't remain silent. The Quran will correct whoever that person or thing is, be it an angel or not an angel. Now I want to just give a few examples just to clarify the point. Because Pharaoh is declaring his faith. The question is, should we accept this declaration of faith? That's the question. Chapter 49, verse 14. قَالَتِ الْأَعْرَابُ آمَنَّا. The Bedouins said that we have faith. Allah is now saying, قُل, O Prophet, say to them, لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا, you don't have faith. See, Allah is correcting a so-called declaration in faith. Allah is correcting that, saying to God, tell them, لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا, you don't have faith. وَلَكِنْ قُولُوا أَسْلَمْنَا, rather, you Bedouins say we have Islam, that's okay. But don't say you have faith, don't say Amen now. Allah is correcting them. وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ, faith hasn't entered your hearts. It's an explicit correction here. Pharaoh said that I have faith in that which Bani Israel had faith towards, and I am one of the Muslims. Allah said, is now the time? When you were a rebel and you were one of the Mufsideen, why now? But he didn't reject it. Yes, he said, isn't it a bit too late? Okay, it's a bit too late. But he didn't say, no, you don't have faith. You're lying. It's of no use to you. These are all statements Allah has in the Quran. To people who got faith the last minute, he said, it has no benefit to you. To people who said, we have faith, he said, no, so you have Islam, you don't have Iman. Here though he says, now, but he doesn't reject it. That's one point. With the angels, Allah corrects the angels. When he wanted to assign a Khalifa, the angel said, أَتَجْأَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا. You want to assign on earth one who is doing fasad and corruption on it? وَيَسْفِكُ الدَّمَاء, one who will cause or spill blood. وَنَحْنُ, whilst we نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ, we give your praises, extol your praises. وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ, we sanctify you. Allah then leave that statement of the angels go unanswered, because it was wrong. Angels are limited creatures, and therefore, as a result of their limitations, they may give limited answers which are deficient in themselves. They don't sin. They're never muqassir, but they are qasir. They're not muqassir, but they're qasir as a result of their limited nature. And this is one example. Ibn Fanori, from these one or two sentences, raises, he's one of the important urafa in his Misbah once, raises 18 faults of the angels because of those two sentences that they uttered. But those faults, it wasn't as if they did intentionally, or it was something they did willingly. It was a result of their limited nature. But here Allah corrected them. He said, Allah said, إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, I know something you don't know. See, Allah corrected them. In the same way Allah corrected the statement of the Bedouins. He said, we have faith. No, you have Islam. He corrected the angels too. Sometimes Allah doesn't correct the angels because what the angels said was correct. For example, chapter 3 verse 42, وَإِذْ قَالَتِ الْمَلَائِكَةِ, when the angel said, يَا مَرْيَمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ اسْتَفَاكِ وَطَهَّرَكِ وَاسْتَفَاكِ عَلَى نِسَاءِ الْعَالَمِينَ. Verily Allah has chosen you as a ma'soom, as a wali, has chosen you as a guide, like many other Ma'sumin that have been chosen. You too, Maryam, have been chosen by Allah. وَتَحَرَكِ, He's purified you, like He's purified others. But there's one advantage He's given you. He's chosen you over all the women of all worlds. The first choosing of Maryam, which the verse mentioned, Maryam doesn't have superiority over many, but she was chosen like many Ma'sumin were chosen. This second choosing, though, she was unique over all the women, and that was because of the birth. This fact of giving birth the way she did was unique amongst all women of all worlds. But here, this was a statement given by the angels. Allah was silent. It's a correct statement. Okay. And just one other example too, because someone from this community asked the question. Maybe I thought it's a good time to, I'm not sure if they're here or not, but it's in relation to the throne of Bilqis. And the throne was brought from X place before Nabi Sulaiman, which was a far distance, in the blinking of an eye. This coming of the throne from X to Y has been explained in many ways. We have traditions too, but let's see what the Quran says first. And then many people go through secondary sources and attribute things to Allah Tabatawi, who apparently says this was an example of the unfolding of the earth, Tayyul Arab, and there are other explanations given too. So it's the same bed travelled through whatever mechanism before Sulaiman. And then they bring traditions to support it. But let's see what the Quran says. The Quran gives an understanding here. And then Allah is silent again. So we have to take it as fact. This is a position which Ibn Arabi has. It's not very common actually amongst the scholars. But again, it's through the Quran here. He focuses on two verses. Chapter 27, verse 40. فَلَمَّا رَآهُ مُسْتَقِرًّا عِنْدَهُ. When Sulaiman saw the throne, مُسْتَقِرًّا عِنْدَهُ. Most translations translated saw the throne, saw it placed before him. But placed is a past participle, passive participle. Why are they translating it as mustaqarra? The verse is mustaqirra. It's an active present participle here. The translation is different. They translate, you see their translations, when he saw it placed before him. No. The Quran says mustaqirra. Here it would be translated as when he saw it establishing or placing. Istiqrar means establishment. Establishing before him. This is the process of establishing before him. And that's why, because of this mustaqirran, Ibn Arabi says it wasn't a case of the same throne moving and being placed somewhere. That throne was annihilated into dust, and then before Sulaiman, from dust it was made. Then the question is, then is it exactly the same throne? Because if the same throne was to travel very quickly, it would be the same throne. But if it was to be annihilated and then remade, it wouldn't be the same exact throne. Philosophically, exactly the same throne. What does the Quran say? 2 verses later. فَلَمَّا جَاءَتْ, when she came, when Belqis, the queen of Saba, came, قِيلَ, it was said, أَهَكَذَا عَرْشُكِ, is this your throne? And then look at the answer. She said, قَالَتْ كَأَنَّهُ هُ, it is as if it is. As if it is. Look, and the Quran is silent here. It's taken that as fact. It's not exactly the same throne. It's like that throne. And this is something, again, one can use with that tool. When the Quran is silent, and Quran relates something from anyone, angel, queen, Bedouin, or whoever, if it's wrong, the Quran will correct. If the Quran is silent, you take it as fact. Now, people are insisting it's Tayyul Ard. It doesn't matter. It may be Tayyul Ard. I don't know. But at the end of the day, either in the Quran you have to prove it, or you have to bring something clear here. The Quran is clear. It's plain Arabic. It's plain Arabic. And this is one of the wonders of Ibn Arabi, that hyperliteral analysis of this plain Arabic Quran. So here, Pharaoh says, Allah says to Pharaoh, now, when you used to rebel and you were one of the corrupt ones, Allah doesn't reject that iman of Pharaoh. He doesn't reject it. And therefore the Urafo say it was accepted. And as we've discussed, the Urafo believe that he had faith before. It was just disclosed for the first time. For the first time, with this drowning now, not before. With all those previous steps, nothing happened. But when the drowning was to happen, that inner dimension predominated. He sought refuge with his inner dimension. It completely annihilated that outer dimension. He was in total despair now with that outer dimension. It left him with him and his self, that inner destitution. He disclosed it, and Allah accepted it. Okay. And then he says, وَأَنَا مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ, I am one of the Muslims. Chapter 302, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ حَقَّ تُقَاتِهِ, you who have faith, have taqwa before Allah, how it should be acquired. وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ, don't die, إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. Say that you be a Muslim. Now here, say, oh you who have faith, iman, don't die save as a Muslim. This is because there are degrees of Islam and there are degrees of iman. There are degrees of kafir, there are degrees of munafiq. All these have degrees. Whoever groans when their spouse puts food in front of them, they are a munafiq. Which munafiq? Is it the munafiq in the Sharia sense? Of course not. One who just groans because of the food they've been put before them. They're not a munafiq in the Sharia sense, but they are an ethical munafiq. Munafiq has degrees. The ethicist has delineated all these degrees. It's a very long discussion. Sayyid Bahrul Ulum in his treatise, he goes through all these degrees. Anger emanates from kufr. When you see people who are angry, when they enter those moods of anger, that anger emanates from their kufr. kuf isn't that canonical Sharia kuf. The poor person isn't a kafir, but they are kafir in the ethical sense. All these have definitions. Sometimes a simple Bedouin may say, I have Islam. Sometimes Ibrahim alayhi salam says, I am one of the Muslims. Because that level of Islam is a high degree. Allah Ta'ala discusses these in one verse in chapter 2. He discusses the degrees of Iman and Islam. So we start with degree 1 of Islam. The next degree is step 1 of Iman. The next degree is step 2 of Islam. Then step 2 of Iman. Then step 3 of Islam. Step 3 of Iman. Step 4 of Islam. Then step 4 of Iman. He goes through these. But when the verse here is saying, O you who have Iman, die as a Muslim, it shows this dying as a Muslim, this Islam is higher than that step of Iman. And here, this is how the Pharaoh is dying. Not only does he profess his Iman, which he had, saying that I am one of the Muslims. This Islam is higher than that first step of Iman. And he's dying like that. Or in chapter 41, verse 33, وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا, who is better in speech than, one who, مِمَّنْ دَعَى إِلَى اللَّهِ, who calls you towards Allah. That's what the Pharaoh did. At the end, he did it at the end though. وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا, and does a good deed. وَقَالَ إِنَّنِي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ, and says that I am one of the Muslims. It's actually the route that Pharaoh took. But at the end, he did it at the end though. But it was accepted by Allah. What Allah had hoped for, لَعَلَّهُ يَتَذَكَّرُ أَوْ يَخْشَى, became actualized. As we said, when Allah says perhaps, Allah's hopes are definitively occurring, not like mine and your maybes. When Allah says maybe he will fear, maybe he'll be apprehensive, maybe Pharaoh will remind himself, these maybes are definitively occurring with Allah. It doesn't mean that Allah doesn't know and He's saying maybe this will happen. And that's a deficiency attributed to Allah. Okay, I'll stop here because now the story then enters a new line of. I'll just read 1 or 2 sentences from where we left with Ibn Arabi's Futuhat. So this is continuing from where we left from Ibn Arabi's book last night. Al-Ana أَزْهَرْتَ مَا قَدْ كُنْتَ تَعْلَمَهُ. Now, and then Ibn Arabi is giving a commentary, as if Allah is saying, now you are disclosing that which you used to know always. وَقَدْ أَسَيْتَ قَبْلُ, when you used to rebel. وَكُنْتَ مِنَ الْمُفْسِدِينَ, and you were one of the corrupt ones. فِي أَتْبَائِكَ, in relation to your people, your followers. This is also extrapolated from the Quran. Chapter 20:79. وَأَضَلَّ فِرْعَوْنُ قَوْمَهُ, and Pharaoh misguided his people. وَمَا هَدَى, he didn't guide his people. And here, you want the corrupt ones in relation to your people. You misguided them. Now you're getting faith. وَمَا قَالَ لَهُ وَأَنْتَ مِنَ الْمُفْسِدِينَ, that which Allah said to Pharaoh, that you were one of the mufsideen. فَهِيَ كَلِمَةٌ بُشْرَى, it's a statement of glad tidings. that Allah is giving the Pharaoh. فَهِيَ كَلِمَةُ الْبُشْرَى لَهُ عَرَّفَنَا بِهَا. Allah is defining for us by means of these glad tidings and this clause, لِنَرْجُو رَحْمَتَهُ, so that we have hope in His mercy. When such a thing happens to Pharaoh, that we can have hope. Everyone has a Pharaoh within, but when it happens to this particular Pharaoh, inshallah, we can have a lot of hope before Allah. لِنَرْجُو رَحْمَتَهُ مَعَ إِسْرَافِنَا وَأَجْرَامِنَا, so that we can have hope in relation to the sins that we've done, the deficiencies that we have caused. And the verse